Now, ladies and gentlemen, my guest has stated in her book, Where Did the Towers Go?, that today's program is, well, she stated, and I'm stating as well, that today's program is dedicated to the memory of all those who have lost their lives on 9/11 and to those courageous first responders who continue to die in large numbers today due to the toxicity of the air that they were exposed to on that fateful day. Words alone, ladies and gentlemen, cannot express all that they have done for the American people. And, well, again, the evidence that my guest has amounted in her investigation and research into the World Trade Center catastrophe, or let's just call it a false flag, by far the most comprehensive expose detailing what scientifically happened to the towers. Now, my guest earned a PhD degree from Virginia Tech and is a former professor of mechanical engineering with vast research expertise in experimental stress analysis, structural mechanics, deformation analysis, material characterization, and material engineering science. Her research has involved testing materials including complex material systems in the area of photomechanics, or the use of optical and image analysis methods to determine physical properties of materials and measure how materials respond to those forces placed upon them. Her area of expertise involves interferometry, hope I said that right. In forensic science, she taught graduate and undergraduate engineering classes. She is also the author of Where Did the Towers Go? Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Judy Wood to our program. Hello, doctor. Thank you so much for joining us today. Let me raise your volume up here. Thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, and thank you for having the courage to have me on your show. Absolutely.
Thank you for being on, doctor. Now, Dr. Wood, tell us about your key TAM case, and you filed this case against the contractors involved in NIST, that's the National Institute of Standards and Technology, their investigation of 9/11. You filed it basically a whistleblower's complaint, also known as a false claim under the False Claim Act and the Lincoln Law. Please tell us about, what I believe is a historic case against these disinfo artists out there that can say what they want. You know, they could play with Legos all they want, but they don't have the knowledge or the guts, like yourself, to bring this information to a federal court system, or even to NIST for that matter.
Well, thank you. Yes, I was the first one who filed a request for correction to NIST. That was my act of whistleblowing, where I noted various errors in their report and suggested that they fix this. They surely want to fix it and notify their contractors who helped with this, who messed up. And some of the examples are Underwriters Lab, who made 2 half-scale models and 2 full-scale models of entire floor spans. They set them on fire, cooked them for twice as long at twice the temperature, Fahrenheit, and none of them failed to support load.
Wow.
And after, a long time, they had to, quit the test. They ran out of fuel. Yet they signed off on a report saying that fire did it.
That's right.
That's fraud.
Well, absolutely. They've stated thermal expansion. How can that be, right?
Oh, that was the Building 7 one.
That's
and
right.
What is so erroneous about that is when steel heats up with thermal expansion and starts putting force on other things, once it fails, it can't put force on anything anymore. Also, when it's hot enough, it loses strength, so it can't put force on anything. So how can it fail other members? So it's kind of a strange concept.
That's right.
But the striking thing, see, the NIST report isn't completely full of errors. It has a lot of truth in it. They just ignored that when they came up with a solution. But few people realize that NIST and its contractors did not analyze the demise of the buildings. Mm-hmm. They only produced a probable, hypothetical, whatever scenario that had nothing to do with reality.
That's right. Well, it truly contradicts the laws of physics, right, Doctor?
Well, it doesn't agree with what happened. And a term that I learned early on that it's sort of my motto, empirical evidence is the truth. That right. Theory must mimic, not the other way around. That the theory needs to match the truth, needs to match the empirical evidence. That is, the fact. And NIST came up with this model, but it didn't match the facts. So the model is no good. But NIST did report very valuable information. They just didn't use it. For example, that there's virtually no seismic signal. It was very low magnitude, but there were no detectable S waves or P waves with any of the 5 events, which means the building did not hit the ground. There's only that you can't come to any other conclusion. If you slam something down on bedrock, it's going to ring like a tuning fork.
That's right.
It didn't. But there's 3 kinds of waves: surface wave, an S wave, and P wave. P wave, the primary wave, it's the first to arrive at the seismic station. Then there's the S wave or shear wave that is a little bit later, and the lag time will tell you how far away the epicenter is. Like in an earthquake. Those 2 signals travel through the Earth. That's right. The seismic station didn't record anything traveling through the Earth with the demise of the towers.
Wow.
Only a surface wave. Now, if King Kong reaches over and grabs those buildings and chucks them up in outer space or whatever, just removes the weight off the ground, you're unloading the ground. That's like getting up off your mattress in the morning and it recovers, or getting off the sofa. That's right. That would create a surface wave, and that's all that was recorded.
Wow. Really, a lot has been omitted from the NIST report and the original 9/11 report as well. Doctor, tell us.
This was in the NIST report, the fact that there's no S waves or P waves. They just didn't know what that meant, or just forgot about it, or they didn't put that into their conclusions because they did not analyze the demise of the buildings, which was not a collapse. The buildings did not burn up. They didn't slam to the ground. They turned into dust in midair. And we know that there's 3 main things that can prove that. One, if it slammed to the ground, you'd have a pile of rubble left over.
That's right.
Didn't happen. If it slammed to the ground, few people realize the towers were built in the Hudson River with a dike around it. The dike would break.
Right.
It didn't happen. It wasn't ruptured. If it ruptured, you would have flooded all of lower Manhattan, and the underground, the subways, and so forth.
That's right. The bathtub, as you stated, flooded
and
all.
Actually, when they were cleaning up the remains, there's a little corner of Building 6 that was left in the northwest corner. They didn't want to use explosives to bring that down. They used cables to pull it down. On earth moving equipment or grapplers holding a cable to the thing and rocking it back and forth and pulling it down.
Wow.
Because they were afraid to use explosives for fear it would damage the bathtub wall. And that's just a 6-story building and a corner of a 6-story building. Amazing. So you have 2 110-story buildings, each 500,000 tons. And that didn't damage the bathtub was damaged, but not by the building's demise, but by the earth-moving equipment that came in, the next day.
That's right. Right. That's tons of debris that would have came just barreling straight to the ground, and you'd figure that it'd be ruptured, right? But nothing. You say no damage.
They pulled stuff intact out of the basements, like some subway cars.
Mm-hmm.
You know how FEMA comes around and they put a big red spray paint X on it, and they count how many live bodies, dead bodies, or whatever. They have this tally they put on. You saw it in New Orleans. They, when they check something, they put this red X and then count things on it. That was spray paint on the subway cars that were under the World Trade Center buildings.
Wow.
These weren't squashed. There's a subway station or PATH train station there. And the PATH trains, that's Port Authority Trans-Hudson subway, goes under the Hudson River. Mm-hmm. And it comes up on bedrock underneath the World Trade Center on the bedrock there. And you would think if something mashed down on it, it would damage that tunnel.
Absolutely.
It was built, around 1909, I think, is when it opened, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
They must have made stuff better back then.
Right, yeah. They say the older your home is, the better quality it probably is.
And they had water down in the tunnel, and they're worried that it was leaking. But it turns out with all the fire hoses and rain, going down into the basement, that had to go somewhere. It drained into the tunnel. Once they pumped the tunnel out, it stayed dry. It didn't leak. So it wasn't. It had water in there from getting, just flowing downhill. But that was it.
Yeah.
But what I present is evidence. You can't get to a conclusion without the evidence. And this is a serious problem with the majority of our, quote, educational system.
That's right.
People are taught to guess at the answer and work backwards. They may have a tendency to do that anyway, but it seems to be strengthened. I can remember how many students, when they do their homework problem, would first look at the answer in the back of the book and then stir the numbers around, punch them in the calculator, check the back of the book. Stir the numbers around, punch them in the calculator, check the back of the book. They never would look at the ideas going into what they're calculating.
Right.
It was all about getting the answer in the back of the book and then seeing what numbers you had to fiddle with to get that, rather than understanding the problem.
Right, going out and reading the cliff notes instead of reading the actual book.
Right, it's all about trying to jump to the answer in a hurry to jump to the answer. Well, it's the journey that counts.
Right.
And so many people say, well, so-and-so says they have a theory about thermite. There's a theory about mini nukes. There's a theory about space beams. There's a theory about... Why do you need a theory? I don't have a theory. That is the biggest myth, that people like to label things as a theory. I have a philosophy. Let's go look at the evidence.
Right.
And I have a little analogy to present to you. I say, here you go. Let's say I add some numbers. 1 plus 3 plus 9 plus 6 plus 4 plus 7 plus 2 plus 3 plus 9 plus 5 plus 8. And it adds up to 57. Is the number 57 a theory?
No, that's an actual fact. It adds up to 57.
It's the conclusion based on the numbers I added. Is it an opinion?
No.
Is it a view?
Nope. Not
Is it
at
a
all.
thesis?
Don't think so.
Is it speculation?
Nope.
Is it a conclusion based on the sum of the information given?
That's right.
Bingo. Can you arrive at the same number, 57, if you omit all but the last two numbers?
Not at all. Nope. Not at all.
Evidence works this way. If you want to get the right answer in a forensic investigation, you must look at all of the evidence. You don't start with the answer you want and then go cherry-picking the minimum piece of information that will support your thesis.
That's right.
You don't have a thesis with forensic investigations. For example, an autopsy. It's either conclusive or it's not conclusive. Either they have enough evidence to make a conclusion or they don't. And as I say, keep looking at the evidence. It'll tell you what happened. If you don't know what happened, keep listening to the evidence until you do.
Absolutely. Now, Doctor, tell us about your studies in interferometry. Is that how you say interferometry?
Pretty close. Interferometry. It's interference of electromagnetic signals.
That's right.
But it's used in a kind of image analysis to look at deformations on a fine level of whether it's within one material or interaction between materials. It's a very powerful tool. But what it's taught me is to look at phenomena, not at what answer you want. And the more observant you become, the more information you can obtain from your experiments.
That's right.
And so if I look at images and I can see different things, qualities going on within the image of different things happening. Okay, now let's go to the pictures from the World Trade Center. I couldn't miss it. I look at things and say, wait a minute, why is this that way? Why, what's this over here? How could that possibly happen?
That's right. Stands out like a sore thumb almost, right?
But the trick is beginning first with establishing what happened.
That's right.
You first must establish what happened before you can determine how it happened, because if you don't know what it is, how can you determine how it happened?
Right.
Before you can determine who did it and why they did it and so forth.
That's right.
And one of the biggest secrets of how they run a cover-up, I'm going to tell you the secret here. You get people to skip that first step and jump to any of the other steps. Skip looking at what happened and start arguing about how it happened, who did it, and why they did it. But when you do those things, if you don't know what happened, how can you determine how it happened if you don't know what it was that happened?
Absolutely.
You have to assume. So pretty soon you're solving an assumed problem. You're solving an imaginary problem, not a real problem. And you'll never, ever be able to solve what happened.
Right.
And how it happened, and come to the conclusion based on that. But there's a recent news, I don't know what you want to call it, fiasco, a drama, that probably the people around the world even heard about. I was in Italy and giving a presentation and brought it up, and yep, they didn't know the name of it, but they knew of it. The Casey Anthony case.
Right.
So many people would say, well, they came up with the wrong answer. How do you know? People were convinced emotionally what they thought the answer should be because they're going for the answer rather than what happened. As it turns out, the prosecution never determined what happened. So how can you convict somebody of, what was the crime now?
Right, murder.
Was it murder or was it, they hadn't determined what it was. They didn't determine what the crime was. So how can you convict somebody of something, you have a blank there. There's no connection.
Mm-hmm. Well, Doctor,
you need evidence to connect things.
Absolutely. Let's talk about some of that evidence. Now, it seems like most of humanity is oblivious to the fact that a level 3 hurricane was spiraling towards NYC the day of 9/11. Now, as a meat and potatoes guy who flunked Algebra 2, I got to tell you, I mean, how can you make someone like myself or other people understand that perhaps some type of static charge from the hurricane was instrumental in causing the Twin Towers to be dustified right before our very eyes?
Oh, so you're starting out with the answer and working backwards.
Oh no.
We'll get you straightened out by the end. It's a hard habit to break.
Right.
No, we start out, look at the evidence. If you look at more evidence, you don't know what the evidence is going to lead to, so you can't discard it just randomly.
That's right.
But I was looking at how the fumes would go up. I'm not calling them smoke. Smoke implies that the cause is a fire. Mm-hmm. So I use generic terms or invent other terms as placeholders to identify a particular phenomenon, just to keep from biasing my observations, like, fuzzy blobs, fuzzballs, dustification.
Right.
And so I was looking at the fumes coming up. How far up do they go? Well, I bet you some weather satellite images that will show how far up they go. Let's see if I can spot it from the weather satellite images. So I go look on the, weather sites, and wait, what is that? I didn't know there was a hurricane that day.
That's right.
And I started looking into it, and for 4 days it was making a beeline straight towards Manhattan. Mm-hmm. There was a high-pressure system in the Midwest moving eastward that was going to stop it at some point, but they didn't know exactly where. But they thought it would make it turn around the first day. It didn't. They thought it would turn around the second day. It didn't. They thought it would turn around the third day. It didn't. They thought it would turn around the fourth day. Good thing it did.
That's right.
Because the outer bands were right at the edge of Long Island and over Cape Cod. It was raining on Cape Cod because the outer bands of the hurricane were there. Now, a hurricane isn't located just at the eye. A lot of people say, oh, that was 200 miles out to sea. Mm-hmm. The center of it was, but if that thing is 500 miles in diameter, it's on the shoreline.
That's right.
And so, okay, now, what do hurricanes do? We now know there's a hurricane that was there. We know it was underreported, which is pretty weird. How could they be so sure it would turn around in the nick of time?
That's
because
right.
How long does it take to evacuate how many million people live in Manhattan? 6 million?
Something like that. Very big number. Right?
A big number. In Manhattan, you only have a few bridges. And I know that in Houston, when Hurricane Rita was aimed that direction, they had first a voluntary evacuation, then they ramped it up to, mandatory evacuation. And that's all surrounded by land that you can head out of town any which direction. Mm-hmm. Not just a few bridges that only, people in Manhattan don't own cars. So you would you owe it to the people to give them a voluntary time just in case. But they're out of time if it stayed any longer, and there would have been storm surges. Mm-hmm. Manhattan is right at sea level. It would have flooded Manhattan.
That's right.
So it makes you wonder. That's a fact. That's not speculation. As I like to say, is know what it is that you know, and know that everything else you don't know, and don't fill in that gap with speculation when you're doing such an investigation like this. Right. It's to be very careful, because then you fill your mind with stuff that is not true, or may not be true, or isn't fact. It's okay to step aside in a separate box and try out some scenarios, just logic-wise, but don't mix those back in with the what you've established. Okay, so we know that there's a hurricane there. That's a fact. Now, what do hurricanes do? Mm-hmm. Birds know to skip town before the hurricane gets there. Right. There's a static field around hurricanes. Let's go look at see what was happening, right in the outskirts of the hurricane. Turns out the three major airports surrounding Manhattan, LaGuardia, JFK, and Newark airports, all reported thunder on 9/11. Mm-hmm. That's evidence that it was close enough to cause those field effects.
That's right.
We'll leave it at that. We've established that was the environmental situation there. And, like a car wreck, if you're writing up a report on that, you don't neglect to put down what the weather conditions were, just in case it had an influence on what happened.
All right. That's solid evidence right there. Now, Doctor, there have also been many reports that state that the steel from the Twin Towers was sent to China. But from pictures in your book, we see that there really is no steel visible unless they hired Speedy Gonzalez to come and clean up the mess. Now, this is, I believe, a diversionary tactic to keep us, like you said, from asking the hard questions, like what really happened.
No, but people are given answers. Mm-hmm. They usually stop asking questions. People start asking questions. You give an answer, and they quit asking. They don't stop to think, does that answer make sense? Mm-hmm. So they, all the steel was shipped to China and immediately shipped to China. Well, you see a picture taken an hour after the demise of the towers, just while the dust is clearing the air, and the rubble is at ground level. Mm-hmm. But people then will not question that, because they'll assume that was later and all the steel went to China instantly or something. I'm not saying it didn't get beamed to China. I'm not saying how it would have gotten there, but it wasn't there immediately afterwards. How could they have removed it that quickly? That needs to be explained. So where did the rumor come from that it was all shipped to China? You need to show me how it got to China in 1 hour.
That's right.
And that's it seems that doesn't add up. Not only that, many first responders discuss how there was no rubble there. Mm-hmm. And where'd the building go? They didn't even know the ones in Tower 1 during the demise of Tower 2 came out and where they were. They thought they came out of the wrong direction of the building, because wasn't there a building here?
Right. Wow. Yeah,
it is really strange, but there's one particular quote. I didn't find it, by Michael Ober, who talks about he didn't remember hearing the sound of the building hitting the ground. Mm-hmm. I don't have it handy, but he said something like, "Why do I not remember the sound of it? If it's that big of a building, it should make a loud noise." That's
right. Yeah,
and including WTC 7, mm-hmm. There's a video of somebody getting interviewed with Building 7 behind them, and so from the camera shot you see Building 7 behind them, and partway through, you can hear conversations down the street and various other noises in the area, but you don't hear anything from Building 7, and you see it just start to move downward towards the ground, and it's either the interviewer or the cameraman says, "Whoa, whoa, whoa!" When you notice that the building's just dropping.
Yeah.
No sound.
Terrifying.
How do you get? It should sound like it was raining dump trucks.
Right. You would expect that tons of debris barreling to the ground. You'd expect a huge sound to be emitted. But really, Doctor, it's what is it? It's Locard's exchange theory, right? I mean, there's a trace of evidence left behind for everything that's done, right? I mean, they say that the steel was sent to China. Well, let's trace the evidence back and back and back until we get the story
correct. Who made that statement, and why did they come to that conclusion?
Right.
Where are the receipts?
Yeah, that's right. We need a return on our investment there.
I'm not saying nothing went to China. You could have 2 beams go there, so you could say beams plural, but there wasn't much of any material to remove. Beginning, with the first pictures, but also there would be, and this is the third biggie that demonstrates the buildings didn't slam to the ground, the seismic signal. And we had talked about that, the lack of S wave and P wave for all 5 events that day. And just a surface wave. And the surface wave for Building 7 was equivalent to like a jackhammer. It was a 0.6 on the Richter scale.
Right.
And the Richter scale is exponential. And so, comparing that to a controlled demolition like the Seattle Kingdome, that was a 2.3 equivalent on the Richter scale. And the Building 7 is 6 times the potential energy of that building. So it should be a bigger number than 2.3.
Absolutely.
Another problem was, like with Tower 1, the ground shook for 8 seconds during the demise of Tower 1. If you drop a bowling ball off the roof, it takes about 9.5 seconds for it to hit the pavement below.
Right.
So why would the entire building go away and the ground shake for only 8 seconds?
I'd seen your work in actually your theory, your philosophy, better said. Yeah, I changed it.
My
Philosophy,
evidence.
Your evidence regarding the billiard ball on a film titled 9/11 Mysteries. Now they go way into the controlled demolition aspect, and they barely hint at your billiard ball theory. But again, you stated that a billiard ball if a billiard ball is to fall in a vacuum with no air resistance, 110 stories, it falls at about what, 8 or 9 seconds?
9.22. 9.22 seconds.
Right. So that's what happened.
With no wind resistance in a vacuum.
Right. This pancake theory of theirs is totally thrown out the window.
Or progressive collapse. The building did not collapse. And that was my big first issue with NIST in my whistleblower document, is the very title of their report was, something about the final report on the collapse of the towers.
Right.
But they assumed a collapse. They didn't demonstrate it, and their evidence contradicts a collapsing building. They have correctly in their report the seismic or the lack of seismic signal. But they just didn't take that into consideration. They also have in the report the silent demise of Building 7. They didn't know what to think of that, but, it's in the report.
Right. Now, going back to the bathtub, the concrete tub which held back the Hudson River, and like you stated, it wasn't damaged, and it really rules out the fact a lot of people, such as Alex Jones, state that the mini nuke theory could have happened. Really, more theories than solutions. Doctor, I saw an interesting article that states that you might consider suing certain malicious operatives and I hate to call it the movement. I consider this a revolution for truth, for our freedom.
I'm not talking about that, but what I will say is what they have done is actionable.
Right.
Because it is reckless disregard for the truth. First main article or series on my website was entitled something to the Star Wars program was in there, but this was, and it's explained, this big yellow box under the title, it's explained that at the time that I first posted this, the big argument by the detractors was saying that energy weapons don't exist. Right. Well, what were my dollars for in the Star Wars program? The Reagan group.
Right. Bob Bauman
nicknamed it, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I have the statement up there about that the former head of what became the Star Wars program is a member of the Truther movement, which is interesting. But energy weapons we know exist. We know that direct energy exists, but that is not how I came to the conclusion. I came to the conclusion through the evidence. I didn't even know about, I just never thought about energy weapons before I saw the evidence, but the evidence told me they exist.
Right.
If you see massive steel falling through the air with horrendous volumes of dust, ejecting out of it, and then it doesn't hit the ground because it's run out of material, it just all turned to dust.
Mm-hmm.
That's evidence that something that can do that exists. The fact that the steel beams turn to dust in midair shows that there's a technology that can make it do that. Now,
Incredible.
What technologies do we know of? There's main categories. There's kinetic energy weapons. Kinetic energy is something beating on something.
Right.
A wrecking ball, a hammer, a missile, a bomb, blowing stuff into chunks.
Right.
There's nothing touching it while it's falling through the air. So that doesn't work. Thermal energy, like, heat and so forth, but there's evidence that the buildings were not cooked to death.
That's right.
So that doesn't work either. The reports are initially the dust cloud was cooler than ambient temperature. So thermal energy is out the window, kinetic energy is out the window. Something that did not touch it, that affected it remotely. And that's my definition for directed energy is energy that's directed. Directed by, like giving it instructions,
mm-hmm.
As well as directed it geographically. We want to affect buildings with a WTC prefix. Mm-hmm. There you go. The post office across the street from Building 7, as far as I know, didn't even have a scratch on it.
Wow.
I even went and evaluated the building myself. The building did not fully spill across the street.
Wow.
That's not a controlled demolition. So this is why it's, some form of energy that's directed. And I think we'll agree it was used as a weapon.
Absolutely. Dr. Judy, like you've stated, just because you don't know the make, model, or serial number of the exact technology that was used to bring down the Twin Towers, I'm assuming probably from GE or something like that.
Acme, like in Roadrunner cartoons, it's called Acme. Acme model
That's
XX1.
Right. That's right. It doesn't mean just because you don't know the model or the exact technology that was used, it doesn't mean that you don't know that there's that you
don't
know
have proof that exists.
Exactly. There's evidence that proves a coup d'etat, a psyop was implemented on that day, and your evidence, doctor, it really speaks volumes. I mean, you've stated like.
But I don't
mm-hmm.
go to a coup d'etat or any other explanation. Remember, I'm not jumping to the who and the why.
That's right.
I'm not going to there. But what I'm saying is what happened. Right. Whatever it was that happened, something caused it to happen.
Right. These strange anomalies.
Not just anomalies. This is evidence of something. And what the something is, we know exists because we have evidence of it that it left behind.
Right.
So, my detractors, one of their favorite things is saying, you can't prove that such a weapon exists. Yes, I can.
That's right. Right, with
the
building toasted cars.
Turned into dust in midair. Therefore, that is evidence that such a technology that can turn buildings into dust in midair exists.
Right, just by looking at the video, I mean, you see the toasted cars, the weird fires that sparked up a general distance away from the towers, correct?
That is evidence too.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's something different about the environment that caused that. And we know about when that happened because the first thing happened, the buildings go poof and the dust cloud rolls out and it goes up. Mm-hmm. Early on, I was heavily criticized for saying it went up. But when the first responders talked about not being able to see their hand in front of their face because the sun was completely blocked out because of the dust cloud that went up,
right.
That's pretty good evidence that it went up. And then they said, well, thank goodness the car in front of me just lit up because then I could see where I was. And then this guy, Patrick Connolly, was walking down West Broadway, and the cars were lighting up as he went down the street. So he lit his way. Patricia Androvic, her turnout coach, he said they should call it a burnout coat because it was like a human flashlight.
Oh, my God.
Her coat was on fire, but she didn't talk about getting burns from it.
Mm-hmm.
Her shoelaces were on fire. She didn't talk about being hit by anything. She got some of her hair messed up. It toasted some of her hair, but she didn't have burns on her skin that or a kinetic energy, boom, something hitting her. But she talked about seeing cars blowing up on her as she walked down the street or ran down the street.
And I believe,
so this is after the towers turned to dust, just after.
Wow. And I believe, what was it, the number, about 1,400 cars it was that spontaneously combust? I mean, what kind of technology can cause this type of extreme deterioration, turning steel beams into, like you've stated, toasted tortilla chip-like material? I mean, what can cause steel to be deformed in such a manner? I mean, we know kerosene is not a hot-burning fuel. I've heard you say that the technology is reminiscent of almost a microwave. I mean, you have people who would rather jump to their deaths, doctor, naked than withstand that.
I don't even go to that conclusion. They went out the windows and they hit the ground and they died. But
right.
I don't believe they voluntarily jumped out the windows.
Wow.
Because you look at them and the logic that I go through with this, it isn't conclusive that they chose to go out the windows. Because some of them, it's like they fell. They're looking like, how to get here? Whoa, like somebody flapping their wings. Like they're trying to steady themselves. How to get here?
Mm-hmm.
It's like they end up, maybe they jumped from something and didn't realize they're going out. There's a lot of different questions around that. But what it says is something strange was going on in there. The poor firefighters, they're trained to save lives. That's what they live for, to save lives. They'll give their life to save a civilian's life. But they were helpless, and there's no worse feeling, no worse human emotion than to feel helpless. And here they were, helpless to save these people. It must have just torn them up. And several of them, or many of them actually said, they've never, in their entire career, seen, more than one person jump.
Wow.
20-year career. They one guy had seen just one guy jump from a 3-story building, but that was it. They've never seen people. It's certain death to jump from high up. People have more of a survival instinct than that.
That's right. More self-preservation as human beings.
And there was no evidence that it was fire-induced. And I got to looking at some of the images and see these people hanging from the 105th floor. There weren't fumes coming out those windows, but they're outside the building for some reason. And there's one guy that appears to be taking his pants off. He appears to be hanging by one hand and one foot from the 105th floor, taking off his pants. He already has his shirt off. And you look and you see other people have their shirts off and pants off hanging outside. That doesn't make sense. You ask any firefighter, more clothes the better, because that's a protective layer between them and the fire.
That's right.
And if there's some, unexplained reason why they want to remove their pants, well, why not? And if there's smoke inside, why not just take a big deep breath, step inside, get the pants off, step back outside, and start breathing again? Mm-hmm. What necessitates taking the pants off outside the building, hanging by one hand and one foot?
Really?
You start looking at, more of these kind of questions, not just quickly glancing at something and running to an answer, but just be content to look at the process and leave things unanswered until the answer reveals itself. That is probably one of the biggest lessons here. Because if you jump to conclusions, you've been led to that conclusion.
That's right.
From a biasness. But if you just if you don't know, fine. That's, be comfortable with that. Because eventually something might come up. For example, the peeled effect on the cars. When I first noticed that, I didn't know what it meant, but I could see there was this trend. So I just put that in a category. The peeling effect, it was like split thickness of a car door was peeled. Mm-hmm. Like it was delaminated, but this is not a laminated structure.
That's right.
What would cause it to peel? And it was about a year after that that I was wandering around on the internet and was led to some blog, and I looked, and here somebody had reproduced every single one of the effects that I had already cataloged, and one of these was a peeling effect. So, I'm not saying that is exactly what happened, but here's parallel evidence. So let's go look at how this was caused. And what I present in my book is parallel evidence and actual evidence.
That's right.
Just toying around with different concepts. Like, for example, hot things glow, but not everything that glows is hot. Mm-hmm. Just because you see something glowing does not mean it's hot. And for an example, I show a fluorescent light bulb and an incandescent light bulb. They're both glowing. One's hot and one's not. Amazing example, right? And I'm not saying that I have a theory that fluorescent light bulbs destroyed the buildings. A lot of people claim that whatever's in my book is my theory. No, I'm showing concepts, parallel evidence, demonstrations
your philosophy, right?
What we know.
Absolutely. Now, Doctor, I have to say I owe my career in radio to one man. And that's Nikola Tesla, the father of alternating current, who pretty much
Hooray.
made exactly. More radio broadcasters need to acknowledge that. Now, this man made wireless communication possible in 1894, and really our whole modern world revolves around Tesla's ingenious work. Now, Doctor, please tell our listening audience about the Tesla and Hutchinson effect.
Well, that blog that I happened upon, it was the blog of John Hutchison. Mm-hmm. Tesla, I need to see stuff. Being from Missouri, the show me state, I need to see see the evidence. And Tesla, it's stories we read in a book. They're probably true, but it's in a book, and I can't go question Tesla. But John Hutchison lives in the here and now, and he's reproduced a lot of these effects. Oh, let me go check it out. So I go to his lab and witness it. What he's done. And he's been able to reproduce a lot of these effects, and he's not technically a scientist. He just enjoys fiddling around and was creative in reproducing Tesla's work, as well as the work of T. Townsend Brown, mm-hmm. And looking at how surfaces become distorted when you put a big charge into them. And he'd get some different things happening, like something would go flying up. Just fly up. He also has, levitated cannonball. Mm-hmm. You also get things just, crumbling into powder. Sound familiar yet?
Right, absolutely.
Or this one funny one. It's a big copper, solid cylinder of copper, making a big, curling up like a U-turn. And there's a solid molybdenum. It's about 2.5 or so inches in diameter, solid molybdenum, and it does this, curls up in this curlicue thing. Mm-hmm. There's a steel bar that he had that was bending in the middle, and like it sort of turns into jello, and it was doing sit-ups. That was kind of cute. Right. Another a flat piece of metal, kind of like the shape of a metal file, that just developed a crack in the middle, and part of it just started moving to one side. Wow. And there's another piece of steel that is like jello and shimmering, and it almost looked like it had a heartbeat. It was, kind of strange. But amazing. Once the gizmo's turned off, things kind of re-solidify if they're still together. Mm-hmm. If they're, once something's in a powder, it's done with. Right. And I have this analogy that it's like musical chairs. The music stops playing, you got to sit down, and sometimes there isn't a chair for you. Uh-huh. And you grab on a chair, but while the music's playing, everybody's up kind of floating around. Imagine that the atoms are like that. They let go of their connections, and they're just kind of floating loosely. Wow. And the music stops playing, and they need to grab back to their seat. That's right. Doctor, let's talk about the nature of what appeared to be a pyroclastic flow on 9/11.
Tell us, why did that dust cloud stop at the building lines before the Hudson River? That seems odd to me.
It seemed to, I'm not going to say why. I'm just noticing the evidence, and the evidence was that it seemed to have rolled a particular distance, which is also, you could say, for a particular period of time, and then it went up. It rolled out, came to a stop, and then went up. And it just happened to be where those buildings were. On West Street, the first building, which is the South Tower, when it rolled north, it went up to Warren Street. And then when the North Tower went poof, it rolled up to Chambers. The buildings are about a block apart, and that's about a block difference. So they rolled out for the same distance.
Wow.
And it was probably the same time because it was the same speed of the rollout. And the dust didn't roll out all that fast. You may not have been able to, outrun it initially, but towards the end you could outrun it. You see from videos people just kind of trotting along, or a brisk walk, and then they see they're ahead of it, and it turns into a fast walk. Because it rolled up right to that pedestrian bridge and then stopped. And from the overhead images, you could see after the South Tower went poof, I'm not going to say collapse, it's just my term for it turning to dust. The dust cloud rolled up, and you could see a abrupt line on the pavement where dust, no dust. And then the next one rolled up further. So without even seeing the buildings, you could tell from the dust on the ground what time the picture was taken.
Wow. Now, Doc, before we run out of time here, we're running short on time. Please tell us about Building 7 and like the Twin Towers.
What about Building 3? And what about Building 4 and Building 6?
Right, there's
Building 5.
The whole WTC complex is vast. But let's talk about Building 7. Like the Twin Towers, it appeared to be lathering up, as you've stated in your book. Now, do you believe this very same thing happened with the Pentagon as well?
Whatever it was that happened is the same characteristics and all of them. Building 4 is a good one to talk about. Okay. It looked like an X-Acto knife sliced off the north part of the north wing, and the rest of the building just turned to dust and went away. It reminded me of when I saw the aftermath of the big tornado that went through Topeka, Kansas.
That's right.
In the late 60s. And it looked just like, tornadoes tend to slice things. Where if you had binoculars, you could look in and see what was on somebody's desk. It was just that clean of a slice. It wasn't like stuff piled up and collapsed. It was a slice with, the building removed. If you remember the Pentagon, it had a slice where you could look in. There's a big, looked like an unabridged dictionary on a podium, sitting right on the edge of that slice. It was not singed. It was not destroyed. The pages were,
That's right.
It was just open. A
desk was there unharmed, unhindered.
and the windows were not broken.
That's right. No, incredible.
So if you have a fireball there, how does that happen? It must not have been a conventional fireball. It must have just looked like fire.
Right.
And you had toasted cars there. All the same symptoms. But we have the most amount of evidence and data for what happened in New York City. But once you study that carefully, it's easy to recognize the same symptoms elsewhere. Frothing up trees. I saw pictures of I originally had a chapter about the Pentagon for my book, as well as other chapters, but as it is, the book was big enough.
Right. Really an awesome collegiate book, really. And thank you so much for sending me a copy, Doctor.
Well, you're welcome. You're quite welcome. It's an important book. The best feedback I've gotten and the best compliment is folks have said it's a course in critical thinking.
Absolutely.
And that is indeed what my intention was. I don't want to tell people the answer. I don't want to tell them, what they are to think. I present them with the evidence, and I kind of walk them through, here, look at this, and I point the arrow over and have a question. Why is this way?
Right.
I'm not making any conclusion from that. I want them to process it. Why do they think this is that way? Like a car upside down.
Right.
Why is the car upside down? Why are all the leaves still on the trees next to it? Or why is this car totally toasted? And I use toasted as in it's toast. It's history. You know, it's totally destroyed. You got to get another one. You can't fix it. It's beyond hope. But you have a toasted car, but the tree hanging over it still has all leaves on it and isn't burning.
Really, it's so much evidence that your book brings forward, brings to the table. Now, Doc, unfortunately, we're out of time. Thank you so much, Dr. Judy, for putting your life on the line as you've done to bring us this incredible information. I feel that the families of the fallen are and will be eternally grateful to you for your wisdom, your courage. It's clear that you do this for the people on page 32 of your book. Thank you so much for joining us today. And please tell our listeners where they can find your incredible book, and give our listening audience your website as well, Doc.
WhereDidTheTowersGo.com. One word, WhereDidTheTowersGo.com. That's the book site, and you can choose to order from the book site or from Amazon from there. And my regular site, which is sort of a warehouse of data. I left it as is. It's where I stashed my data like a file cabinet. Is drjudywood.com. That's DRJUDYWOD altogether .com. And at the top of that page is a 2.5-hour video from the Energy Conference in Holland last year. It's probably the best video to watch. So if you don't want to delve into too much just yet, but want to watch a video, go to drjudywood.com, and the video is right there at the top.